uh, although we have an apropos film, Summer Hours. Now, this is an interesting film. I hope some of you may brush up on your Chekhov in a lot of ways, but I'll get into that in a little while. But Summer Hours from 2008. And what makes it a distinctive film is, number one, the director is Olivier Assayas, who's won many awards for his work. He's done many important films in France and abroad. But he did this film. He was awarded a special commission celebrating the Musée d'Orsay's 20th anniversary at the time. Now we're approaching we've just approached its 35th anniversary, which is interesting, and which is why you get those museum sequences in the middle and towards the end, and the use of the artworks themselves in the film. The film was inspired by one of the curators and originally conceived as being, excuse me, a celebration of the museum by 4 directors, but Assayas came in and conceived it as a story rather than a documentary, and wanted to tell a story around it that would connect a family and its connection to art and legacy, because it tells a bigger story about France, about globalization. It's the story of 3 siblings who are left to deal with the possessions and the secrets, as it's revealed, of their mother, Helene, after she dies. For years, Helene had been devoted to preserving the legacy of her uncle, Paul Berthier, a famous painter that's fictional, has been long deceased. The children are uncertain, as is Assayas, in telling the story of the exact nature of Helene's relationship with her uncle Paul. And against that backdrop, the director also wrote the script, as I said, explores the fragility and the resilience of family relationships, as well as the power, sentimental and financial, that objects can hold over us, that particular objects can hold over us. Thus, it becomes a meditation on art and life, especially eternal life, if you will. We have Helene, as I said, who was the matriarch. You have Frederick, who is the oldest of the siblings. And he is an economist, an economy professor, also he writes books on the economy, and his wife, Lisa. And they have 2 children. There's Jeremy and Angela. Jeremy is the youngest. He runs a Puma factory in China with his wife, and they have children. And then there is the middle daughter between the 2 brothers, Adrienne, and she is played by Juliette Binoche. And she is a New York designer, dividing time between New York and Paris. And then there is another prominent player who comes in more towards the end, is Sylvie, who is Frederick's daughter. And there, of course, we cannot ignore Eloise, the housekeeper. Eloise, the housekeeper. Most of the treasures that do appear in the film are authentic. They were lent to the filmmaker by the museum, and they are donated eventually within the story by the fictional characters. Among the artists that you saw in the film, just to recollect, are Camille Corot, Odeon Redon, Dome, Hoffman, who designed furniture in Austria. He was Viennese, Lalique, and of course the little Degas plaster that's found in pieces. Summer Hours exemplifies, even as it ponders France in the age of this unstoppable globalization. And this was in 2008, but I think what happens in the film is amplified today. It's become exponential in many ways. The obvious comparisons to the film, as I said at the beginning, is to Chekhov's Cherry Orchard, the Cherry Orchard, and there is a cherry orchard at the end of the film that we see. with its harsh coming, as Chekhov in his Cherry Orchard predicted the coming of a new social order and the passing of one that was lovely, but essentially useless, or at least non-utilitarian. And it deals with the disintegration of a culture and the triumph of economic forces over art. The triumph of economic forces over art. Summer Hours isn't so much about how the siblings deal with the loss of their mother as it is about how they grapple with the meaning of all the things she's left behind. All those things she's left behind, packed with rich meaning and deep implication. It portrays the curious chemistry that transforms certain objects into art, as we see when the museum moves in. In the second act of the film, we see the bond between the three siblings beginning to dissolve as each declares that they will be living on three different continents. It's also an essay on the nature of sentimental and real value, as well as the need to protect French culture in this homogenizing world. Adding even more drama to the discussion is the realization that Summer Hours is talking not just about the potential disintegration of a society and a culture. What is most unusual about the film is that it is concerned about what will be left of French culture if the country's best and brightest leave. If the country's best and brightest leave. Paul Berthier, who was an Impressionist painter within the story, is kept alive by Helene because she had the special bond with him. Helene is extremely conscious that she's been the keeper of the temple, but her children won't be because they can't be. That legacy has no sense for them, no meaning. They don't remember him. As you remember, one of the sons remarks that all they remember was the tumor that he had on his neck. They don't really much remember him. Olivier Assayas, the writer, had stated, if you deal with a classic theme, the issue is how you make it relevant and modern by being in touch with actual individuals living in today's world. What is basically tearing apart families and transforming ancient traditional cultures is the forces at work in the economy. This is what he's talking about in the film. He explained what is transforming the economy is the fact that every single business has to go global. So all of a sudden, people who used to work in an office in Paris and spend the weekend with their family learn that their business is buying a branch in Bulgaria. And the next day they will be moving to Sofia. This is not a situation confined to France. It's happening everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the modern world, and it's something that changes the logic of a culture. In this film, in part, the meditation on those changes is wrought on this legacy of the three children. Jeremy's job with the sneaker company is lucrative and fulfilling enough to keep him in Asia for the foreseeable future. And Adrienne, though she disapproves of his corporate career, as she mentions in the film, is similarly enmeshed in the transnational economy, working in New York and Japan and designing for a company in Japan. Frederick, an economist, no doubt understands the forces that keep his brother and sister far from France and is in any case powerless to challenge them. And how we watch them deal with each other after the funeral, the thought and denial on Frederick's part that Helene had an affair with her uncle, which is later expressed by the museum curator, how Frederick is saddened by the realization that the house and mostly everything would have to be sold, and most of all, realizing that they would be spread to the ends of the earth, never coming back to live in France. He understands it, but he refuses to accept it. He doesn't want to accept it. And to top it off, later on, we see the problem with Frederick's daughter, Sylvie, bringing a third generation into the picture. There is Helene's longtime housekeeper, Eloise, practically a member of the family, who is asked to select an item from the house as a remembrance. She chooses the one item she really doesn't like, and not knowing that it's an extremely rare vase. because she doesn't want to take anything of real value, as she says. Yet she's pleased with the vase, remarking that she could put flowers in it and think of her old friend. And with that scene, Isaias captures the essence of what it means to keep history alive inside of us, to keep memory inside. This is the value of that art. To her, it doesn't have monetary value. It has an intrinsic value for life. What matters more than the vase itself is the life you put inside of it, A precious piece of furniture that finds a home in the museum, if you remember at the end, when Frederick and his wife were walking through the museum, and nobody really notices it, even though somebody makes a mention of it, is also in a state of exile. Just as members of a family, once the older generation is gone, are both set free and set adrift. That piece of furniture sits there without anything on it. It's devoid of life. It's lost its life, and now it sits in a museum, cold and sterile. Late in the movie, we see how that Degas was being successfully restored in the museum studios. And then the economist and his wife gazing at that desk, now on display, and he says, Frederick says at that point, strange seeing it here. I don't know what to think. It seems caged. As they gaze at one of the vases in the collection, they think of Eloise. And then we see her saying goodbye to the house. We come back and we see Helene saying goodbye. Eloise has come back and she can't get in. You notice her looking through the windows. She's saying goodbye to the house, and she leaves flowers at Helene's gravestone. And this faithful servant is now also lovingly deposited in her little retirement apartment somewhere in the South. If you remember, her nephew leaves her, she goes into her apartment, and she's now gone off. Did Helene have an affair with the uncle? Is one of the big questions in the film. If you remember, Frederick and Jeremy argue about it at the cafe, and also at that dinner at their home, at Frederick's home, and each of them has a different opinion about it. Ultimately, Isaias stated, the director stated, I have no idea if she had a relationship with her uncle. And it's more about how the siblings each react in a different way to that notion. Adrian is obsessed with the notion that, yes, there was a physical relationship between Helene and Paul. Jeremy basically doesn't care. If it happened, it's like good for them. And Frederick, disturbed because he doesn't really want to deal with it, because if it happened maybe when she was living with their father. And that's not how he wants to remember her. What I'm saying is that ultimately when someone disappears, that person disappears with history, with secrets. That's what history is about. And that's what the director is getting at. You try to reconstruct what has been, but ultimately the reference is lost. The facts are lost. Helene is gone. The real witness is gone. The fact is gone. And people are left to guess. We can only guess. They can only guess. We're so often left guessing. Yes, we are. We're so often left guessing about our forebears. Also, for some of the ransoms he's trying to describe in the film, the reasons he's trying to describe in the film, the familial bond is less precious, less necessary to people nowadays. The familial bond has become less precious. With the spread of people around the globe, of families, even here in the United States, moving from New York to California, from New York to Florida, the family bond breaks up. The family bond can break up. The only way to hang on to the past is to let it go. That's an elusive paradox. Frightening, it's a frightening idea. But as the director somehow makes it feel concrete, even if comforting, the magic of this film is that even in its elusiveness, it gives us something to hang on to. It gives us something to hang on to. It is his version of the cherry orchard. And the comparison is very apt. Frederick in particular suffers because he's so attached to those two paintings, the Corot's. His kids can care less about them. If you remember, they look at the paintings and to them, they're just paintings. They speak to him somehow, just as those beautifully executed teapots and trays speak to Adrienne. They're also quintessentially French, but they're part of a France that Frederick feels is rapidly disappearing. His siblings no longer live there and visit only infrequently. His fondness for those paintings seems to represent a deep-rooted love of his country, something that he doesn't quite know how to express and probably doesn't even know that he feels. While the movie is in part about the beauty and the power of these objects, it's also about the way the things around us, divorced from the life of their surroundings, can end up meaning nothing, can end up meaning nothing. Think about a chair you love, and it breaks down, and you put it downstairs for the Salvation Army or for the garbage heap. Think about that. It means nothing now, and how much it meant to you while you owned it. Asaya shows us Helene's special writing desk sitting in that museum after her death. As I said, it's a beautifully crafted piece of furniture, yet without its usual mess of papers and gewgaws, it looks dead and ordinary. His touch is alert, but relaxed in the film, very relaxed. His frames are loose. The cinematography is loose, yet it's vivid. Summer Days is earthbound for the best of reasons. In the room where her uncle died, Helene holds up his final sketch. Remember at the beginning, she's showing Frederick his final sketch of the window and the curtains. And he holds it up against that window and curtains to show the contrast between life and life transformed and preserved. Life transformed and preserved by the uncle, and now he's looking at real life. And in the end, we see the kids again. Sylvie, her brother and their friends partying at the house, another generation. And in the cherry orchard, she talks about remembering her grandmother and her uncle painting her, and how she told her about bringing her children there. And now the house has been sold. She tears up. She remembers the cherries. She remembers her grandmother. And the house is now being sold. I mean, the cinematography in this film, the camera, the way it moves around, seems less like a mechanical apparatus than an organ of perception, than a pair of eyes, even of consciousness. Its movements mimic those of a person's attention. If you notice, the camera will turn. It will look at a character. At times, it's restless, trying to gather information from all directions. At times, it observes with serene and sympathetic concentration, occasionally puzzled, but never bored. We can be puzzled by what we're looking at, but we're interested. The music, the guitar, the harp, and the strings is melancholic. It captures the mood of the film. Summer Hours is, in its understated way, as much about France as it is about Helene and her children. Her property ends up in the museum because it is part of a cultural, what we call a cultural patrimony. Each piece is an emblem of a tradition that is worldly and cosmopolitan, but it's also rooted in rich local soil. It is so important to remember the objects we have. And look what's happening around the world today. Britain is returning objects that were taken from colonial times. Soldiers who stole objects, stole and sold objects after the war are being returned to their countries. Even in Vietnam, there was special religious items that were taken and now being returned. In Africa, they discovered statues here a couple of weeks ago, wooden statues that are emblematic of village elders who died and are very important to the tribes. And they were stolen from Africa. They were taken, and now they're being returned. And now they're being returned. So we can understand, this film is almost a reference point to what that means. Even though it's about France, it's about these objects, it's about a family and how they look at these things and how important they are. It shows how a whole culture is dissolving in front of our eyes. And to a certain extent, it can happen here. it can happen here. So that's the story. That's what the film is emblematic of. And now I'd like to hear any questions, comments that you may have about the film, your feelings. Linda, go right in there. Thank you.
I loved that movie. I really did. And it brought a lot of things home. My children, for example, they do not have the same appreciation. And I didn't realize until I really saw that movie, the sentimentality that I have for certain things made me quickly go to my closets and drawers, and I started to dispose of things that I knew would be thrown out. So I have a pile of things that maybe somebody would appreciate, and then I have those that I'm giving to Goodwill. I was fascinated with the way the movie began with the credits. I thought that was a really unusual way. It really made me look at that. And there was just so much in that movie that I took away. One of the funny things is I happened to see a skit that Seinfeld does on garbage. The making of garbage. Do you know that one? Where he said things are moved from the place that it's in place to the next place, and the last place is the garage or the attic, the making of garbage. But even with photographs, I know that my children have looked at them and they don't have the same appreciation. They say, "Ma, I don't even know that person." So it really makes you think. The sentimental feelings that we have are not always the same with our children, with the other generations. And that woman that loved that little vase that she thought was just a token piece, of remembrance, she didn't care about the value, the price. It was definitely the memory.
So, yes, and that's really what it is all about is memory and the loss of memory.
I think, for example, I was trying to keep a legacy going, but it's not the same. The children are really calling it stuff. So they have their stuff. I don't hear.
Shelly? Are we frozen?
I don't hear.
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
I hear.
Now,
Yeah.
We lost it for a while.
Shelly, can we hear you?
I can hear you.
Shelly is frozen on my oh no, now he's not.
I'm not sure. Shelly, are you able to hear us?
Can you hear me? No?
I can hear you, Isadora. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I had just the opposite reaction. My children only want the memories. They don't care of the value about anything. They want the things that were my mother's and father's from the old country. They want the shawl. They want the painting. They want the pot. That's the only thing that's important to them. So it's very interesting how each generation has different reactions.
Yes, well, it's also. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Forgive me. I'm sorry about that. But it's also what we imbue them with. What we, it's how we remember something or how somebody remembers something and passes it on to us. Of course, a great work of art. Sometimes we just look at it for the value in a family. They'll just look at it for the value. If it's worth something, it'll get shipped off to Sotheby's for auction. And that's what they feel, and it's the connection to those things. It is about connection, but it's about, what did they represent in the first place? There's all that conversation at the beginning with going to the uncle's exhibition of his art in San Francisco, and Helene has the book that's so important about it. And she really felt like she was the protector of this, and that all disappeared with her. none of the three siblings really seemed to care about the uncle anymore. They just, that was all lost. That was all lost with Helene. So you had that. Okay, Jackie, and then Arlette. I see you, Arlette. Jackie?
Well, I think something you have to think about too is that every generation does that. We probably didn't care about some things with our grandparents or our parents that they did. But I think one of the things that we're not, we both just said to each other off screen that we've liked your rendition of this much better than the movie. To us, this is just this is just typical of what every single family goes through when they close out a house after a death. And so it really didn't mean as much to us. But I think one of the reasons that the kids didn't care as much about the stuff, and particularly the grandkids, is because she cared so much about it. Through the beginning, when she was still alive, she was a very harsh, almost vicious kind of person. And it seemed like the only thing she cared about was Paul and the art. So, you have to, it's not just what we imbue the kids with, it is literally what you said that we imbue them with. And what did she give to them? She gave them a feeling, it seemed to us, like the art and Paul were more important than anything else. So I think that's part of it there too.
It's a great comment, and I want you to think of something in the film, and that's why these are these little clues in the film. It's also a film about communication. It's transmission and communication. And what did they buy her for her birthday? A phone, so she could keep in touch, right? Just what you're saying, Jackie. Did she ever open it? Did she ever have it connected? No. It never, it stood on the shelf in the window. Remember at the end when Eloise is looking in, the box is still there. It never was open. And that's to your point, is the fact that she lost a lot of communication with these children, probably for that reason, is her uncle meant so much more to her than anybody else. And the art that it sort of superseded her relationships. Yes, thank you. Arlette?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I felt that Helene, wanted to be in control of her life, and whatever she had done with the uncle was very, very private, and she didn't want her children controlling her. And as we get older, sometimes the children just like to do that and put their 2 cents into what you should do and you shouldn't do. But going back, I have grandchildren that have already picked out oil paintings that they want of mine. And I'm so happy. But then you have the other one that said, start downsizing. We don't want to deal with all that stuff, which every family goes through. And you know what? I'm in control. I won't downsize. So when I'm gone, they could say whatever they want. I'll be looking from up there. But the acting was so beautiful and poignant when Binoche had taken up the tray and the things that she adored. You could just feel it. She didn't have to say anything. Her expression said it all. And that's true that few things are very sentimental to different people for different reasons. And I thought it was terrific. She played that part beautifully. And it is what it is with families. And we're all going to get there. One way or the other. You know, and my son, I just want to say, which really surprised me, I have photos of Holocaust people, my in-laws' parents' wedding pictures. My son loves old photographs. They're all going to him. And then he found, which shocked me, he found a gentleman in the concentration camp with a number. And he said to me the other day, there's something about this man. I need for you to call the foundation, the Shona Foundation, and find out what happened. So you see, different things for different people have meaning.
Oh, absolutely.
And that photograph has been in there for years.
That's another story. That's another story. That's from the photograph. Yes, that's a whole other story.
And we all have different memories because some of the brothers won't remember things that their sister will remember and hold to her heart. It's just
Certainly.
one
Well,
of those things.
this is how the film resonated with you. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Marilyn?
I really enjoyed the film, and I liked, there were just several things I really liked about it. I liked the treatment of the way the family dealt with Eloise, how important she was to make sure that she's taken care of. And I think that doesn't happen as much today as it used to. And it just basically, it was just a lot of the effects that globalization really has on all of us. So there was a lot that was going on in France, which I find probably one of the most nationalistic countries that I've been to or I visited, way back from when I was very young. And my impact was how nationalistic France was. And what's happening there, and it's not very different from the nationalism that we're losing here also because of globalization. So it takes place all over. What I also enjoyed though was, and maybe it's because of the European influence that Canada has, but I really love the stuff. I really love the de Havilland, porcelain and the silver and some of the things she had, not because it's stuff, because it's so beautiful, the workmanship. I just don't know that there is appreciation today for that workmanship. Now in the United States, Lenox is maybe like Villeroy and Bosch, but there's nothing compared to Meissen or de Havilland or Heron, or I mean, the workmanship is not there. That being said, my kids don't want anything that I have anyway, so I'm going to enjoy it as long as I can because they don't want it.
Well, it's true. I mean, the things we see in the film, is there are certain things that are lost over time in terms of that craftsmanship. But it's not really, I don't look at it as nationalism. I look at it as culturalism.
Yes,
I look at it as,
I agree.
the French are very cultural, down to the fact that, their words, that their pronunciation, their writing, everything has to be the way they put this down in writing every year. They have their own elements of style. And it's very important to them, and they've lost that over the years. It is dissolving. France is becoming, as I say, with most countries who were colonial, their colonialism is coming back at them in terms of migration. Is we see from those past colonies, in France in particular, whether it be Algeria, whether it be Morocco, or even parts of Vietnam, because it was a colony of France's. Those people have moved to France. There is a population of Vietnamese in France. There are Moroccans. We know there's a large Muslim population in France, but they come from those colonies. So, these things, and look at England. In England, there's a huge population of Indians. Because it was a colony, and because each country granted those colonies passports. They gave them, in a sense, citizenship. So now it's coming back to bite them in many ways, because now those people, their people are leaving and going to other countries, and these people are coming in, and they're taking active parts in the governments. They are. So this film represents a lot of these changes that are going on. This was back in 2008. This was before the migration, there was this mass movement of migration in the world. It was just the beginning of it. And before we had all these other economic problems, naturally. And we see it changing again. I mean, I see it with Ukraine, with what's happening. I mean, Russia would willingly destroy the history of Ukraine that they've tried to reclaim since the Soviet Union broke up. And Putin wants to put that to an end. He wants the old Soviet Union back. And hopefully it's not going to happen, but these are the threats. And China itself also, with Hong Kong and Taiwan, wants to wipe out their individuality. So it's really, you know, this film reflects, you know, on a micro level, the macro, because we could look at the art of all those countries too, and see families in those countries going through the same things, which is what's interesting.
Shelly, before I leave, the one thing I want to say is the feeling that I got from the movie when the three children disagreed or didn't go, it was about their relationship. I just didn't find a level of materialism. Unless I missed it, I did not find a level of materialism for the economic value of all this stuff. It was just they didn't want it. It just a different lifestyle.
Well, it was really the museum that started to put the material value on things when they were sitting down.
The
You know, they were
Dorsey,
talking
right.
about the Corot, you know, what's this worth? And if they rip up the collection, which is what Adrian was interested in doing, selling some in New York, some in France, that it would decrease the
That's
value
what
of the
it is.
collection.
It's always about the
And
money, I guess.
yeah, it
And when
does.
they say it's not about the money, it's about the money.
It's always about the money. It's always about the money, especially today. But it was about the, you know, the museum looking at it. But there was one guy, one of the curators saying, why do we want all this furniture? It's going to go down in the basement anyway. Nobody's going to see it. You know, why are we going to appropriate it? There's always that argument, you know, but where is it going to go? Where is it going to go? But there are people who, Marilyn, who do appreciate those things. I could speak, you know, on that. I have a daughter involved in it, so yes, they do
Good.
appreciate the porcelain, the china. You know, it's not as many as used to, but they
No.
are there. They are
Okay.
there. Thank you. The other Marilyn now.
Okay, first of all, I love the film. A couple of thoughts that I have. Number one, we can't confuse love of ourselves with the love of objects. And I think today's children want something very simple. So they don't want the heavy pieces of furniture that we may have. And we have friends that actually come from the Mayflower all the way back. They have furniture in that house that is museum quality. I have to know the quality. None of the children want it. It's not part of their lifestyle. It has nothing to do with their love of their mother.
No.
And it's interesting that in our case, and I happen to do watercolor paintings. My grandchildren they've all put in bids for the various paintings. I was even surprised at some of the ones. You know, one is this nude black and white picture, and one of the kids, that's the one I want. And the other thing, in terms of what is value, we happen to have some things, as everyone here has, that are very, that are valuable. But one granddaughter says, you know, Grandma, you know the little tiny little plate that you have, a little green plate. It's a little tiny plate that I picked up in Portugal. You know, the little green plate, Grandma, I really like that plate. So I gave it to her. And so I think that we shouldn't feel hurt if the kids don't want these objects. They don't know what to do with them. Their apartments are smaller. And I think that the emphasis is not on the old, beautifully crafted pieces. So, I mean, that's my feeling. But
Sure, but Marilyn, please make sure from now on they pay through the nose, whatever they want.
Well, I have them writing on the backs of every single thing that we have. You want this, fine. I'll put your name on it. And
Well, I want you to plan a world cruise and tell them and make them pay. So you can go look at beautiful art. Okay, Rachel. Thank you, Marilyn. Rachel.
Well, I'm with Jackie that the movie, I've seen this type of movie before, but I liked what you were when you talked about it. Also, there was some symbolism that I really did enjoy, because I'm a museum person. I love museums. Okay. So now when I look at a piece of furniture, I'm not going to see it in the same way. It has a history, not only the person crafting it, but who had it. How did it get here? You know, there's a whole story in that. So the ending, I really loved. I loved that, you know, here is this piece of furniture that we know a little more of the background of this piece of furniture, but nobody else will. When they go to the museum, they're just going to see a piece of furniture, but there's a history behind it. And my mom, when they were downsizing, she goes, Rachel, I have these dishes and they're like porcelain dishes and it's a 12-piece set. Okay. I live in an apartment and I'm going, Mom, I really don't want it. And now both of my parents have passed away and I am so glad I have it, and I have it displayed. I have it like on a shelf, like over my kitchen cabinets. And every morning I look at it. So I am so glad she was determined for me to do that. So, but it was just, there is value. There's two different versions of value. Sentimental is also a value, and also financially. And sometimes they don't combine and sometimes they do. So
Absolutely. That's a terrific story. And I think it is an important one, because every time you look at it, it keeps that connection to your history, to what it all means. And that's true. I mean, look, we do that, it's you're both you and Jackie mentioned, you've seen the story before. Of course we have. Of course we have. We see it in a little different way, but of course we have, because that's what movies are about. Movies are about these kinds of things. I mean, think about how many movies are about an object, that has value to somebody. I mean, we laugh and we look at an adventure film like Indiana Jones, but it was about the Ark, the original one. Remember that? And it had all this value to the Nazis, had this value to Indiana Jones, to history. I mean, all of these things. So film is based on that. Stories. It's about stories. And what they're doing by giving this away is they're ending the story. They're ending their stories in many ways. How are these, that's why Sylvie cries at the end. She doesn't know why she's crying, but she knows in her heart, I'm not going to be coming here anymore. I'm not going to see this cherry orchard. And not seeing the cherry orchard means maybe she won't be thinking about her grandmother that often. Maybe she won't remember that story to pass it on. I mean, that's what we can pull out of the story. That's what, resonance is. So I think that's what's important to look at. And that's what you're reflecting right there. Susan Nedge.
So I'm listening to all of you, and we're all in the same sort of position with our children and possessions and whatever. But what was interesting to me were when they three sat down and they were having whatever coffee or something, and they were finally started to talk about divvying up things and getting into the nitty gritty. That the middle, I guess he's the middle child, the son that's go in the Orient, that he said that he needed them to sell the things for his financial purpose. And that was definitely his modus operandi. He didn't seem to have any attachment to anything. Now the daughter had some attachment, and the oldest son was much more sentimental, because he was losing going to the house on the weekends. He was losing this whole lifestyle. And it was a very interesting difference between the three of them. And then the daughter was very interesting because she was into the design and the beauty of things. And she picked things that had real beauty to her, real beauty. And so Marilyn, you can feel good about that she picked objects that she loved, that tray, and she loved the tea set. And so I thought this was very interesting. And I think that we all know that things are things. Now, I lived through an earthquake, a hurricane, and I lost a lot of things. Things are things. And yes, you do hold on to things, and they're wonderful. And it's nice to have something for my grandmother and for my mother. Okay. And what I'm saying is, it's a thing, and it's nice to have things, and it's beautiful to have things, and it's only in your heart what you want. So I thought I saw this from a very interesting perspective of three children with three different views on what to do.
Well, you're answering the question of what I always talk about with film, is when we look at characters in film, everybody has their reasons. Everybody has their reasons. You have to look at the reasons, the motivations behind these characters. And yes, Jeremy, the youngest, he was the youngest of the three. His motivation was, I need money to survive. And also, but think about this, he was going to China. He left France behind. He left for, so anything, the fact that it was French was meaningless to him. He was being absorbed into a whole new culture in a way. So there's a reason for that. There's a reason for him not caring as much. The reason being naturally the money, but also the fact that he's leaving. And that's important. But it's that she loved it for the design. I don't know how much of a connection it has to the past, but for her, it's got an artistic connection. And for Frederick, everything was familial for him. He was the oldest sibling. I mean, he sits in his car and cries because he says, my past is gone. My past is leaving. And as he jokes with his wife, he says, we'll let her have the house. God knows what she'll do to it, but, let her have it for the weekend. I thought that was interesting. It's because of what those meanings are. But thank you, Susan. Jackie, you had something else?
Well, just one other thing I was going to say is we all talk about leaving things behind and people's motivations and things. One of the things Larry and I noticed through the whole thing, because we're really into architecture, was in many ways, it was only what was in their heart anyway, because the house was literally falling down. Every single scene you saw, the paint was peeling, things were breaking. So it was really kind of an interesting thing. The house to us was symbolic of what the whole thing was, her relationship with them, their relationship with her, and with all the things inside it. It was already crumbling and falling down.
Yes. I mean, that's, again, yes, the house is representative of that. It is symbolic of all of that, without question. But I will tell you, you talk about how do you determine value of something? As I said, I have a daughter who's very involved in art. And art history, and she works for Sotheby's, and we have like these paintings that we really haven't placed any value on, but we know they're old and we know they have some significance, and we always ask her, and she's, they're nothing. We figure she's waiting for us to go, and then she's going to put them up. She doesn't want to do it now. Anyway, but that's the way I sometimes feel about what she's doing. Is this worth something? Nah, nothing. Just leave it in the drawer. But anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Well, we're still here. Well, I'm glad some of you enjoyed the film. Most of you got some things out of this film, I'm sure. And what are we looking at next? The next film, which is the last film of the summer. I will be away in August, so I will miss you all. The next film is Perfumes or Parfum. It's a lovely story. I wanted to leave you on more of an up note, and it is a lovely story, and it is about perfume in certain ways. It's about scents, SCENTS, but it's also about a lot of other things. It's about a woman who is a celebrity in the creation of perfumes, of world famous perfumes, as they use the names. Because we see how it takes a combination of sensitivity and chemistry to create the perfect scent. But when a man comes along who is a chauffeur that has to take her, and he's in need of work, and desperate to retain custody of his daughter, as you'll see from the very beginning, and enters her life, where it all leads, wow, it's an interesting little journey, and it reveals a lot about perfume, but a lot about people. It is an enchanting little journey into life's assorted aromas. And I don't mean just perfume. You'll see. I think it's utterly charming. And these two characters are wonderful. They're two actors at the top of their game. You might even recognize one of them from TV, from a show on Netflix. So I'll leave that to you. And I'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Okay, so
Thank you
without
very
any,
much, Shelley. This is
Shelley.
Thank
so
you.
great.
Yeah.
the title
Thank you,
is-
Shelley.
Have a
My
nice
pleasure.
summer, Shelley.
As
Have a nice
always.
vacation.
well,
Thank
see
you.
you in 2 weeks. Don't, come back.
Well, After the next one, you can wish him a great summer.
Yes.
And have a great cruise. I think
So,
that's.
so the,
what you
na-
want.
the name
Good
of the
trip.
film, the
The
name of
name
the
of the
film
film
is
is
in French.
Perfumes. Parfum. Parfums.
F-U-M.
Parfum.
It's in French.
It's in French. Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
And it's
On the
available on Canopy
27th.
and Amazon.
And it's
Canopy
on
and
the
Amazon.
And it's on the 27th of July.
Right.
Yeah.
27.
So, yes, a Thursday.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
I'll
thank
look
you.
forward to
Have a good
seeing you
week.
soon. Thank you.
Thank you, always the best.
Thank you, Dora.
Stay safe,
Hey,
everybody.
Stan.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rachel.
Another great evening, Shelley. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Marilyn. Yeah, this was fun.
It
This was
was.
fun. I knew this film would touch a nerve.
And it did.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
Yes.
That-
Yeah, it reminded me how I brought all my mother's complete china to my
Uh-huh.
daughter every time